Hello my lovelies! Today we're drawing some cute little guys. 5 of them to be precise. If there's one thing you know about me, it's that I like drawing. If there's 2 things you know, it's that I love tabletop RPGs. And if there's 3 things, it's that I love me some scrungly little guys. As you can imagine, Goblin Quest, a tabletop RPG by Grant Howitt, is a TTRPG made just for me. In Goblin Quest, you take control of 5 goblins each. In sequence, not simultaneously. Why 5 whole goblins? Because goblins in this game are completely inept. Their quests are often the most simple tasks, and even then fatalities are not only common, but expected. As such, each player needs several goblins in the wings to step up and replace their currently active character when they inevitably meet a hilarious end. I've played once before with 5 goblins in a trench coat, literally, named the Odd Bodies. Noggin, Tum, Lefty, Righty, and Punt. Whenever the head died, bickering would break out inside the coat as they reshuffled and reassigned roles, and a new fella would worm their way out the neck hole to take over. Good times. The quintet we're drawing today are not the Odd Bodies, however. Instead, I'm drawing a group of 5 who sadly haven't seen the light of day yet as we had to cancel plans, but I hope to play one day. Meet the Belfries, a clan of goblins themed around an old English nursery rhyme called Oranges and Lemons. Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. You owe me 5 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. When will you pay me, say the bells of Old Bailey. When I grow rich, say the bells of Shoreditch. When will that be, say the bells of Stepney. I do not know, says the great bell of Bow. Here comes a candle to light you to bed, and here comes a chopper to chop off your head. Why this nursery rhyme? I wanted to draw some fun little goblins with bells, and I've always thought Oranges and Lemons was a fascinating nursery rhyme, one with many versions and one that is both cheerful and sinister. Perfect for goblins. First was Old Bailey. The simplest of the lot, given I knew I'd probably use him first and he'd likely die. He's more to fill a comedy trope. I envisioned Old Bailey as the leader, a ridiculously old man who gets funnier somehow the longer he manages to stay alive, and so I decided to give him a big old stick, wrinkled eyes, and grey tufts of hair. Old Bailey is someone who gives wise man energy, like a kindly wizard, until he opens his mouth and comes out with the worst nonsense and terrible advice you've ever heard. Experience, unfortunately, does not always make for wisdom. It can usually make for a big dose of self-delusion, which is what Bailey has. Next up is Shoreditch, one that I envisioned quite early on in the process. She's somewhat of a mascot for the group, given her big bell shape. There's just something infinitely fun to me about characters who have a big helmet or armour suit, or in this case bell, on them, with just the eyes peeking out. The kind where you never see their face, and if they ever do show themselves, we as the audience don't get to see them. Instead, we see the other characters react with confusion, delight, or horror, and we're kind of left to make our own minds up about what they truly look like. While I really enjoyed making these guys varied, I wanted to keep a few elements the same. My general rule is if I give them a very distinctive design element in one area, I try and get the rest to adhere to a kind of guideline as best I can. That was quite easy with Shoreditch here, as most of her is covered with a massive bell. However, I gave her a unique looking eye compared to the other goblins. Not least because it looked better, but also to really add to the mystery of just what is going on under there. Speaking, however, of unique design elements, Stepney. I've always enjoyed when people vary up their animal inspiration in monster designs. Kobolds, for example. While D&D popularised a more draconic vibe for kobolds, in a lot of folklore they're actually described as more mammalian, and are frequently depicted in other media as human, bat, or even dog-like. Compare, for example, a D&D kobold with a Dungeon Meshi kobold, or one of the ones drawn by Tony DiTilizzi. Likewise, I have a real soft spot for goblins that are drawn with other animal features, like a cat or a bat in this case, which is the vibe I wanted for Stepney. This one was really fun to think about, not least the different shaped nose and ears. I really wanted him to feel like one of the crew, a goblin of a different kind, but a goblin nonetheless. As with my rules for Shoreditch, I did my best to keep his eyes and head shape on par with what I pictured for the majority of the party, as well as his little clawed toes. His little bell poncho is actually visible as an early concept on my sketch sheet, along with the big bell Gundam suit that Shoreditch eventually got. Another notable part of Goblin Quest is how completely unprepared and ill-equipped the goblins are. Weapons are taped together with no real thought, a goblin is labelled a bard if they can scream hard enough, or maybe even labelled a wizard if they're good at setting things on fire. I hope to give the impression with the Belfries here that, in their minds, they're all the equivalent of warrior poets, though in reality, not so much. Next is Beau, very much the baby of the group. However, also the raging narcissist. Like the nursery rhyme, I envision him calling himself the Great Belle of Beau. Beau is that bratty kid who genuinely thinks he's the greatest, coolest adventurer that ever lived, and he could definitely take on a team of ninjas. Just you wait, he's definitely done it before, you just were off school that day. I made him this way partly due to the fact it was fun to draw a weird, happy, obnoxious little guy, but also to make it sting less if he got offed in some horrific way. One element that gave me some trouble was the pose. I wanted a fun action pose mid-jump with him brandishing his handbell triumphantly. This was easy enough when I did the sketch sheet, but in a sketch your brain is doing a lot to fill in the gaps. I often find that when you start clearing up line art, it can lose some of the elements that made it work before. Still, I wanted him to be cute, adventure-hungry, and round and jumpy, with a fun little cape and puffy trousers, so I persevered. And in all honesty, some of my difficulties just came from lack of practice. When I've been drawing in a more realistic style and then go back to a more stylized, chibi-fied look, I sometimes need a chance to kind of turn that part of my brain back on. In the end, I really loved the true goblin energy Beau brought, and I loved drawing his big goofy facial expressions and rows of chunky teeth. I need to find an excuse to draw more little fellas like Beau. Something I'm trying to do for all of the goblins is make them look extra scruffy and slapdash. It's something I really love about Goblin Quest's art, and I was trying to emulate some of that here. I also drew some inspiration from a webcomic I love called 10 Earth-Shattering Blows. It's phenomenal, please check it out. Despite the vibrancy of the world, this webcomic still conveys a really dark apocalyptic tone. Something I just love about the art is the attention to detail, drawing of scuffs, scrapes, rust, all of that. It's tied together really well and has a lot of texture to it. Finally, Clement, who is very much the girly girl of the group, or as close as they can get to a girly girl. Her face for some reason gave me a lot of trouble. I wasn't sure if I wanted her to be prim, angry, prissy, confused. All I knew is I wanted her to give big, ugly, cute energy, like a pug. As you'll see, I give up on the face and then leave it for later. Of all the Belfries, she's definitely the one I most leaned on Rugrats references for, especially once I'd settled on her face later. A cute element for her, also as an excuse to add a pop of a different colour, was her pair of little socks that she stole. My headcanon is she lacked the foresight or planning to steal them from like a washing line, for example, but instead wrestled them directly off of kids' feet when impulse overtook her. In the end, she somewhat took on a life of her own with her big hit stick inspired by sleigh bells, and her dress made of a bashed up old bell. She somehow ended up also being the most threatening of the bunch, with implied injuries such as a missing eye and her intense, wall-eyed stare. After all these guys were done, I went back and added a few extra details. Cleaning up some line art here, adding some mud splatters there, that sort of thing. This included adding a few details to Stepney's poncho, and also realising that Clement looked capable of several war crimes, so I just stuck a more menacing chain onto her manacle. I really wanted to imply she has insane strength. When it came to colour, I decided to do all of them on the same layer. This was mostly so I could alpha lock it and not worry about switching layers while I just kind of threw colours down. In my head, I had vague ideas of what tone and hue I wanted each of them to be, and that I specifically wanted them all to be distinct and different. That being said, I wanted some harmonious elements, and you can see me constantly going back and forth sampling colours from each of them to kind of help tie things together. It further helps to blend colours by using a brush that isn't at 100% opacity or has some pressure sensitivity. Letting a touch of the colour underneath peek through when you're layering elements really helps weave everything together. I actually went back in with multiple layers for this just to help break up the sea of beige and brown for their colours. You can see me taking from all ends of the colour spectrum, dry yellow beiges, deep red leathers, and even some greener or bluer tints just to add a bit of contrast. More than anything, I tried to give each goblin some elements in both colour and design that were shared with at least one other member of the gang. hence why I made Old Bailey's design so extra, so I could then steal bits from his design for the others. A rope belt here, a jingle bell there, a manacle on the wrist, all of which were designed to make Old Bailey seem the most worldly of the bunch and the one who gets dibs on all the loot, but that all of them were more or less taking from the same pile of trash. I went back in for the last bit of tidying, and the adding of dirt and the like to break up their designs a little more, make them look a little scruffier, and I feel it really came together. In my mind, they inhabit an old belfry, like a little rat infestation. Like chaotic little gargoyles, they have named themselves the keepers and guardians of the bell tower and surrounding area, much to the dismay of the priests and nuns who actually live there. Luckily for those priests and nuns, whenever this clan get used in an adventure, many of them are going to meet an untimely, or perhaps perfectly timely end. Though that's the beauty of TTRPGs and stories, right? Like an ancient Greek mythos, these troublemakers can die a dozen deaths, in a dozen stories in a dozen ways, yet always come back swinging for a new continuity, a new adventure, or a new citywide disaster causing horrendous amounts of property damage. Long live the goblins.
Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement. You owe me 5 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. When will you pay me, say the bells of Old Bailey. When I grow rich, say the bells of Shoreditch. When will that be, say the bells of Stepney. I do not know, says the great bell of Bow. Here comes a candle to light you to bed, and here comes a chopper to chop off your head.
And that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed our little romp with the belfries. Have you ever played Goblin Quest? What did you make of it? Have you been playing any weird, interesting, fun indie TTRPGs recently? Or do you have your eye on one? Don't forget to comment and tell me what you've been up to. The beautiful people you see on screen right now are my Patreon supporters who are also a part of my Goblin clan. If you'd like to join them, please consider checking out my Patreon. And even if you don't, why not swing by the Discord where we all hang out and share some fun memes. I'm very cool. But right, you take care of yourselves, go make yourself a nice cup of tea and maybe come up with your own goblin party if you have the time. And speaking of time, my dear friends, I will see all of you next time.